Hey, PLN. Welcome to episode 59 of Fresh Air 5, the podcast. Well, as you step into this podcast, you're going to see that it's a pretty short one. Well, the reason being is that we got to the end of the week and I had been sick for 3 days and tested negative for COVID, thankfully, but just still under the weather. You know, that first cold in 2 years, that'll get you. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Thanks for listening, and tell your friends about it, and subscribe yourself. I'd appreciate that. All right. Have a great day. Talk to you. Bye-bye.
I'm Matthew Woods, host of Leading Out of the Woods, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAirAtFive or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected. Hey, PLN, February 7, 2022. This morning, I'm out for Fresh Air at 5 later. It was rainy this morning, and I was also quite sore from walking yesterday as we were out snowshoeing up at the Coquihalla Summit. It was a beautiful day in the snow. We did about 8.8 kilometers, and probably about 3 of those kilometers were in deeper snow. So it was a lot of work, quite sore. But I am now out for my walk this morning. I took in this morning an audiobook called 21 Things You Might Not Know About the Indian Act, and it's by Bob Joseph. And this is a book that I was really strongly suggested to read, and I took it upon myself to increase my understanding of Indigenous issues and things going on here in the country of Canada. And, you know, my heart's really heavy because, you know what, there's this country I live in that I'm so very proud of, but I'm a little less proud of today. The past and the things that the leaders in the past have done and the intentional attempt for cultural genocide in our country is just deplorable. And this book by Bob Joseph it's a quick read. It's a snapshot of the policy of the Indian Act and thoughts behind different sections, and his thoughts and others' thoughts about what is going on. And I just want to say that, you know what, it's important for us to learn and be aware of this. At the end of the line, at the end of the day, here's, for me, what needs to take place. I believe that we need to own up to our roles, and even as an educator today, what do I do to perpetuate and carry on things that are going on that came out of the Indian Act? How does every child matter? And not to take away from the Indigenous concern with residential schools, but that we treat every child with care and respect and honor. And so that's my thoughts. Take a listen to this book. Okay, thanks. Bye. All right, I can't just leave it there. One more thing for February 7th, 2022. Continuing my thoughts about the reading that I did, I listened to an audiobook about the 21 things about the Indian Act you might not know by Bob Joseph. That's not the title. You got it wrong. I'm sorry about that. But it's a book that I just read, and in the last segment, I gave you the name of that. So I would suggest that you take a listen and educate yourself on the matters that are in this book, because it's super important for us to be aware in our truth and reconciliation stance as Canadians and as people. And how do we care for each other? So very important. You know, colonialism has a place, but does it? To what effect and what what degree does it have a place? All right, I don't know what to do about this right now. I'm learning, and I haven't got a conclusion about how to proceed forward other than with kindness and respect and honor for those that have been here in this land much longer than myself. I have some indigenous blood in me, and I am learning to understand that myself. It hasn't been, I don't know anything about my past, about my indigenous ancestry, have no idea. And I am learning, I know a little bit, but I need to learn a lot more so that I can be speak into this as a teacher and educator. All right, thanks for listening. Take care. Take a listen to this audiobook or other readings like this, because it's important for us to be educated so that we are not ignorant people. Thanks, bye. Hey PLN, February 8, 2022, out for FreshAirAtFive this morning. It's plus 4 degrees Celsius, clear skies, and very calm right now, so it's a nice morning walk. I just ran into a walking fellow that I run into almost every morning. His name is Bruce, and he has a dog named Sophie, and we connect at some point on my walk, and it's fun to see and just be able to touch base with somebody as I'm out on the street, listen to my podcast, and yeah, so it's kind of a small relationship that has developed. It's my 5 a.m. relationship with a neighbor in my neighborhood named Bruce. All right, this morning I listened to a New to Me podcast, and this is from the Educational Podcast Network. He's a member of it like I am, and it's Matt Wood's podcast called Leading Out the Woods. And Matt has a side hustle where he does consulting and keynoting and professional development, and he brings us a conversation that he had with Dr. Charles Williams, who is also a consultant and principal in Chicago area, and how they talked about leading through the crisis, or leading through a crisis, and the crisis that we're all facing is the pandemic. So that is the big crisis that we're all dealing with, and how do we deal in situations as we work through that? And Dr. Charles Williams has an acronym, SMART. It has to do with slow down, make a list. A is accept the limited control, reflect on what we're doing. R, I can't remember exactly, I think it's reflect. And then T is tracking how we're making progress for T. And so good to have the tools in your back pocket, so when the crisis does happen, when the poop hits the fan, what are you going to do? Are you ready? Do you have things in place? Thank you, Dr. Charles. Thank you, Matt. And we appreciate hearing from you both. Have a great day. Okay, bye. One more thing for February 8, 2022. I just took in Mindset Monday, Season 2, Episode 6 with George Koros on the Innovators Mindset podcast. And George, thanks for bringing us this episode titled Paying Attention to the Details. And you know, it's so funny how we can focus on the details sometimes, and they seem to distract from the long game. But, don't sweat the small stuff. Well, like you said, the small stuff sometimes and often does make a difference. It's the little training things, I was talking in the last segment about leading into the woods with Matt Woods, and the episode with Dr. Charles Williams, and talking about how being prepared before a crisis hits is important. So paying attention to the details, and the story about the brown M&Ms with Van Halen, that's a great story. It's like a little canary in the coal mine, like you said, that if the canary dies, we got a bigger problem in the coal mine, and everybody's got to get out. So take a listen to what George has to say about this. And when you say you're going to do something, and little tiny things, make sure you do those things. It was back a long time ago when George and our paths crossed for the second time. And he was at a conference keynoting. I was there, fired up because I heard him once at a conference. That's what got me on Twitter, and changed a bit of the trajectory of my space and my life. And he was keynoting, telling some of the same stories. But beforehand, he goes, get on the hashtag and talk about what you're hearing. And I'm going to be paying attention during my keynote. I thought to myself, he's not going to do that. He's talking right now. He can't focus on Twitter at the same time. Well, sure enough, I was tweeting, taking notes, doing things like that. And I saw it pop up that said, George Couros liked your tweet. And I went, are you serious? And so I took a screenshot of that, posted that out, and went, he's actually doing what he said he was going to do. About 15 minutes later in the keynote, he looked across the room at me and he says, that's right, Brian, I'm doing what I said I was going to do. And it's those little details, so make sure you do them. All right, thanks. Last thing for February 8, 2022, I just took in Aspire to Lead with Josh Stamper, and thank you, Josh, for the work that you're doing and bringing us conversations you have with people. Today's conversation I listened to was with Joe Sanfilippo. And Joe, I've heard your name. I've touched base a few times with some of the stuff that you've done, as you, I think, have been on other podcasts. But here you are. You're talking to Josh right now and making a difference, because apparently you live in Fall Creek, Wisconsin, and your mascot is the crickets. Apparently, I just heard that. It's fun. So Joe, thank you for being authentic and sharing from your heart how to be a leader in the space that you're being a leader in, and about making connections and the 30-second moments and paying attention to those little things. My one word for 2022 is presence, and it has to do with being present right here, right now, paying attention to what's going on, being engaged with what I'm doing and with who I'm doing with, so that I am maximizing this moment. So that's not exactly what it is, but I like what I just said. I think I have to go back and listen to this so that I can write that down. But Joe, shouting it from the mountaintop about what people are doing, so important, because people do great things and they don't want to say things about themselves because, I should be a more humble leader. But it's not about being prideful as a leader. It's about sharing what you're doing. So your 1 minute walks to work, I got to look those up. Are those on YouTube maybe? Probably. Or maybe, I'm not sure. I'll have to find out. I'll go to your website and hopefully you have them linked there. All right, Josh, thanks so much. Great to hear your voice again. And everybody, have a fabulous Tuesday. Carpenter out. Bye. And just so I get it right, you're listening to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast with Brian Carpenter. Thanks for listening. Get some fresh air today and learn something. Bye. As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, Podcasts for Educators, Podcasts by Educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself, because you're worth it.